which are required as part of the ODE. Only one is required, but we're overachievers. We're doing twice. So immediately this evening, if anyone wants to make a comment, we'll have public comment as soon as we're done with this work session before you all go into executive session. And then at the beginning of the next meeting. So if the community, for those out listening in the community, wants to provide any public comment, not only can you email us, you can email me, you can email the board chair, you can email people from the district to give input, but there's also 2 opportunities for public comment. So the board, it's ultimately on March 13th at the board meeting, you will vote to approve this plan or not, and we need to submit it by March 31st to the Oregon Department of Education to comply with the integrated guidance deadlines. So again, this is a draft. If you would like to revise or change anything, of course, that is your absolute authority and opportunity to do that. What we're sharing with you is a synthesis of all of the work that all of these groups have done together. And tonight we are available. There are several members of the strategic planning work group. We can all answer any questions or any clarifications that you would like to have. So process-wise, again, I've already mentioned the needs assessment, the data analysis, the listening sessions, the surveys. But since all of that data, first we had the strategic planning work group that came up with what you'll see tonight. They developed the motto, the mission, the vision, the 4 goals, and then performance measures around how we as a community want to monitor and measure success for each of these goals. So the idea is with those measures for each goal, every year we would present to the board and to the community how the district is making progress on these 4 goals. And so tonight I also would hope that you would look at what the strategic planning group, what we came up with for how we want to measure success. So how we'll know if we are achieving our goals or not. So that's a critical component. So the strategic planning work group did the goals and the objectives, the high level. Then we turned over those goals and objectives to staff work groups. We formed 9 staff work groups. I think Chad facilitated about 6 of them. You did a lot, 7 of them. And those work groups, I asked every administrator in the district to co-facilitate at least one. So every administrator participated, and then we invited staff from across the district if they were interested in any of those topics that they could participate on those work groups. And then what you'll see this evening under each goal and objective, there are strategies with action steps. We have the staff who have the expertise and the knowledge on how to achieve these goals and objectives, develop the action steps basically about how we're going to achieve it. Those action steps that were developed by these 9 work groups are all mapped. So you'll see it, it's all lined out. We'll walk through it. Then Chad, amazingly, went through, and at the end of the evening, he'll walk you through the budget templates that were required to submit to ODE about the 6 funding, the 6 initiatives, and how we have mapped these action steps to these grants, and we went above and beyond. So the state just asked us to address these 6 programs: High School Success, the Student Investment Account, Everyday Matters Attendance, Career and Technical Education, something like just these programs. We integrated that plan into a comprehensive district plan that is much more expansive than just the 6 programs from the state. And what Chad did is he actually took the whole plan and mapped it onto additional grants, like the title, the federal grants that we got. So it's not siloed. We're not going to have one integrated plan here just for ODE and then another one for the district, and they're all different funding sources. We've mapped this across our funding sources. So it's an aligned and an integrated plan. And I'm going to submit the whole thing to ODE. And what we've done to indicate which are the required ODE elements, you will notice when we get to the goals and the strategies, we have put asterisks next to the strategies that are specifically to be included in integrated guidance. So if there's an asterisk, That's one of those 6 programs from the state. If there's no asterisk, that's a district-wide commitment that we are using maybe another funding source or general fund to help support. So that's what the asterisks denote. So I'm going to jump right in. You'll notice on page 7 of the strategic plan in front of you, there was actually a separate document of just the strategic plan. It's also in your, yeah, David's holding it. That one, it has this on the front. Page 7, I was just going to run through the vision, the mission, and the values that the strategic planning work group came up with. Again, the motto, each student thrives. And the reason that we chose each student thrives, what we heard from the community and looking at our data, not only do we want to meet their academic needs, we want students to thrive with their social emotional learning, their mental health, their physical development. So we thought the concept of thriving, each student thriving, got at beyond, we're not just here for academics. Our students need our community full support to help them develop holistically as a whole person, a whole child, a whole adult. So we specifically liked the word thrives because we thought that captured not just academic, but a whole well-rounded human being for more than that. And we also use the language each student, and that coincides with the name change for the state, the legislation from the state, Each Student Succeeds Act. It was every student. Each student further indicates that we are talking about meeting the individual need of each and every student. So that gets at that equity. We're going to meet the needs of where our students are and help them thrive, help them develop to become well-rounded, healthy, whole adults. So it was very intentional around that thinking. So the vision for the district is each student completes high school prepared and inspired for the future. That's what we want for each of our students. Our mission is to ensure each student thrives in an inclusive, high-quality learning environment. Our values we identified for the district are integrity. We want honest communication and effective action to advance the district's vision, which is each student completes high school, prepared and inspired for the future. We want transparency and accountability in the work we do, facilitation of the community access to information, documenting our performance, progress, and our stewardship. So that's where those key performance measures we've identified. How are we doing and making progress? The community wants transparency so they can also be aware and informed of the progress we're making. Partnerships in education. Collaboration was a huge theme in the strategic planning work group. We have one of the biggest assets I have witnessed here in Coos Bay is how close our partnership network is. We have so many community agencies, community organizations who will partner with us to achieve that holistic view of the child. We can't do it alone. We have to partner with other organizations in order to achieve this holistic vision we want for our thriving children. Communication, that was a key theme. People want clear, timely, and readily accessible two-way communication. So it's not just us pushing information out. We need to be listening. It needs to be two-way. We need to be listening to our students. We need to be listening to our families. We need to be listening to staff. So it's a two-way communication. Another value is innovation. We want to be open to new ideas to accomplish our mission and make sure they're consistent with our values and that we're having responsible stewardship with our resources. Another key value of the group, inclusivity. We want a learning environment that acknowledges, respects, and honors individual cultural or identity-based ways of being. I'm going to use the correct language, each student to feel safe and welcome in our schools, regardless of their culture or their identity. Another value is our pursuit of excellence. We regularly want to expand professional knowledge and skills to meet the needs of our students. And then finally, we want to make sure we want to invest in all stages of learning. Each student, then we were referring specifically to individual student enrolled in any district program from preschool through age 21. So it's a continuum we want to make sure we're investing in. So that was the mission, vision, values. And then we came up with 4 goals. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. She has been spearheading a lot of the work around developing the plans for our first goal. So I'll let you roll it out.
I had the privilege to sit on several different work groups, but this is the one that I took the lead on. Started with Kara's contacting me and said, "This one's yours." And what I did was, right from the get-go, is I went and had individual meetings with every principal, one-on-one meetings, where we went through the feedback that I had gotten, what had come in, what were they doing, what are they currently doing, and I had a whole bunch of questions of, what are you doing for SEL? What are you doing this? So each of those things I had asked them questions about and started gathering information, and then I asked them to recommend 2 people to be on a work group. And that way I put all that into a Word document. By the time the work group got there, we already didn't have to go, I do this, I do this, I do that. They had already been informed of everything that was already in place so that we could just move forward. Okay, and then we met several times here in the district office. And actually, we just finished our last meeting this afternoon, and we're moving forward with, now we're recruiting people, some of the same people that are going to be on a district level work group for SEL, and start moving forward with our goals. What we decided for the next, we have 6 meetings scheduled for the rest of the year. And that group will be working on a training and PD calendar about rolling out SEL, just working to develop a school culture survey, and then also aligning and looking at our SEL curriculum. So that's how we're moving forward with implementation, but let's go through kind of what the goals are. We're going to be measuring our success with disaggregated attendance data. We're going to do a school climate survey. We're going to do family and community surveys, in particular through Title I. It's something that's already being done now, so it's just adding to that. And then we'll be looking at disaggregated discipline data to see the impact. We have, and our objective was to foster a safe and welcoming school climate. We had specific strategies. I'm just going to go through the strategy and kind of tell you where we're at with it. The first strategy was prevention of abuse. This had kind of, and also working with community partners to prevent tobacco use. It was kind of abuse of all kinds of stuff, whether it was mental or physical abuse. So that's our QPR training. That's Darkness to Light training. We're working with Katrinka from Coos Health and Wellness. She's actually, we just started a team. She's going to be working with the principal at the high school and the junior high to bring that back into our schools to do the prevention activities. So that group is moving forward out of this work. Strategy 2 is to increase mental health support and suicide prevention. We have folks that are being trained to be our own QPR trainers, to be able to do that, to train everybody. This is an area where there's a big focus within our group that we want to decide what training is going to be mandatory for everybody. When you're onboarded, what training do you get? What does everybody get? We have a focus on collaborative problem solving. We're in the process of scheduling a tier 1 problem solving training and also a tier 2 in collaboration with community partners. So just won't be us. It'll be folks from Systems of Care. We've already talked to North Bend. We've already talked to Kairos. So that training will be open. Collaborative problem solving has been selected by Advanced Health and Systems of Care as what we're all going to be doing. So we've got the school district doing it, we've got DHS doing it, all people doing collaborative problem solving training, but we need to decide how much of that training is going to be mandatory and for who and within our district, and we'll work on that. Strategy 3 is to provide coordinated evidence-based professional development staff that supports the social and emotional needs of our students. And I won't go through those unless you have questions about them. I got 5 minutes and I know I'm lucky. Everybody always says, Lisa, you have 5 minutes. I usually end up at the end of the agenda, not the beginning, so I feel kind of privileged today. All right. Strategy 4 provides SEL curriculum for K-12, which supports multi-tiered systems. We want to look at what we have, look at what's out there, look at what we want to do. We actually have funding to do this. We have 4A funds. I actually have carryover funds. I've already put that carryover funds aside so to be able to purchase SEL curriculum and do some of the things that we're missing, as well as doing the collaborative problem solving training. So again, as what Karis had said, is we're actually looking at what other federal grants do we have and how do we build this into our other federal grants? How do we do this into other things? David and I were at a systems of care meeting today, and I brought up the fact that we need mental health support. How are we going to do that? You know, we can't find somebody to do K2, and we were brainstorming ideas, and actually it's going to be on the agenda for our next systems of care meeting. And how do we build those partnerships to bring in what we need? So anyway, it's kind of, we're not going to be able to do this on our own. We really need to build those partnerships. And, you know, so we'll start with our district team. And then at some point, we may be inviting community members to our district team to start bringing that in as we start to implement all these things. And strategy 5 is to establish a continuum of behavior supports tailored to address the needs of all students at all levels of the district. You know, we would really, really like, we have the K2 SEL classrooms. We'd really like to find a way to fund 3-6 SEL classrooms. How do we provide more supports in those classrooms? What kind of training? And there's a big emphasis on, you know, what training do we want? Who do we get it? And how do we make sure everybody gets the training that they need? And when is that going to happen? And building it into our PD calendar so we're not guessing. You know, so this is what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. Here's who's going to get it. So that's where our group is.
And there's objective 2, all the attendance work.
I didn't have objective 2. Okay. All right. I'm part of that committee, so I can talk about that too.
I knew you were on it with me.
Yes, okay. So objective 2 is to improve attendance. It's foster meaningful relationships with families and community partners. We have a team that we've been meeting regularly, even before that. We've been meeting all year and getting together on a regular basis and talking about with the attendance advocates and other folks, how do we improve attendance, what's going on. Karis has been part of that committee, really setting some goals. So for us, this wasn't really easy because it was the work we were already doing. We just put it in paper. And then implementing a multi-tiered intervention system of attendance supports. What are we doing and what are we doing consistently? Let's try to figure out what's going on. Today we had a meeting and we were just assigned to bring our attendance data and bring all of this other data from before COVID. And now let's compare it to what's happening now. So we have principals out there collecting all that data, and we'll be working, meeting in administrative teams by grade bands at this point to start really looking at that data and shoveling down into it and really digging deep to what's going on and what's happened and what we need to do and come up with strategic plans. And then we really want to promote an incentivized attendance, and by having individual plans. It's not like you give everybody with 90% attendance something because that's really exclusionary. But what do we do to individualize plans to break barriers, and how do we get our kids to school and know them and by case, family by family, student by student, and build those plans for them to get them to school. So that's where we planning to go with those two. Any questions?
You never read the goal at the beginning.
I did not read the goal. I thought I said safe and oh,
You did. You said
Okay.
each student feels safe and supported.
Okay.
You just didn't.
a goal number 1, a positive learning environment. Each student feels safe and supported.
Those were all the strategies.
I have one question. And
Mhm.
I've had somebody explain this to me before, and I got about 10% of it. MTSS. Can you tell me
Multi-tiered levels of support.
Just tell me
Multi-tiered
what that-
systems of support.
what that really means?
Okay, what that means is that this is at level 1, this is what we do for everybody. So when we're talking about academic supports, and like everybody gets this reading curriculum, and in behavior or social emotional learning, everybody's going to get second step taught, but to every student this way. Okay, tier 2 is, okay, here are the kids that this isn't successful for. They need a little more. Okay, and what does a little more look like? So in ELA, in English Language Arts, that might be they're going to get an intervention group in Title I. And behavior, it might be, well, they're going to meet with the check-in, check-out person. Okay, checking in and checking out, or doing, you know, an intervention plan for them, as well as still getting the first. So then you get the first tier, then you get the second tier, and then those kids in tier 2 that still aren't successful, oh my gosh, now what are we going to do for tier 3? They need more. You don't replace the other, you add to it. Okay, now we need to add an extra intervention group. Maybe they're going to get an extra 15 minutes of really great reading on top of the tier 1 intervention, or they're going to get the dyslexia kid on top of it. So they're getting 3. And for behavior, that might be, well, now we're going to set them up with a therapist, or now we're going to do collaborative problem solving and creative behavior intervention, functional behavioral assessment. So it just ramps up what we're going to do for intensity levels as we need to do for interventions. And when we say MTSS and behavior, we usually say PBIS, so we can kind of separate a little bit, positive behavior intervention systems, but it's the same thing. It's multi-tiered layers of support. Does that answer your question?
I got a little bit more this time. That's good.
You're at 20% now?
But it helps us to understand that MTSS is sort of a broad label that could be applied.
Yes,
differently to different
it's just the
tasks.
concept of adding and adding and adding, depending upon the more need you have. So multi-tiered levels of support, and it can be applied amongst, you could do MTSS. So this is how the system we're going to use to do math. Here's the system we're going to use to do ELA. Here's the system we're going to use for behavior.
Then I assume there's, a part of that is to identify when students are needing that intervention.
Right, so everybody gets everything, and then your data teams, like for English language arts, then those data teams look at data cycles every so long. They look at the data from whatever assessment where your DIBELS. Okay, they're looking at the DIBELS data, they're identifying those kids, which ones need to go in intervention, and then they look at the data cycles every 6 weeks to see what happens. The same thing would happen with behavior. We would identify what students are having difficulty. As a team, they meet, decide which ones need interventions, and then again, interventions they can come in and out of, and they need to be full. But how do you build the supports? What do we have for solid tier 2 and tier 3 interventions? You know, what's the curriculums we're going to be using for those? So when we talk about SEL and we have our SEL classrooms at the K2 level, you know, what are we using for a curriculum in there? What are those interventions going to look like? How is that different from what we do with everybody? And building that and making it more solid. And also we want to make sure that they go vertically and horizontally, that we're aligned with what we do. So what we do in one building, we're doing in the next building. And what are we doing now, and how do we transition them to the next level? And what does that look like at each building?
We believe historically our data on the behavioral side has been poor, non-existent. I mean, do we feel like on the academic side, especially with new curriculum, we have pretty good resources in terms of identifying that. Do we feel like we are there yet with behavior, or are we still needing to build that up?
Well, that's why we want to have a school climate survey, why we want to look at. We're also, one of the things we requested for our next meeting with the administrators to come in and bring your referral data. Let's look at the severes and look at the minors, and who's getting a referral, who has an incident report, what do those incident reports look like? Are we doing it? Are we consistent? And I think that's an area where we probably need to do some more work about, you do this kind of a referral for this and this kind of referral for this, so these are the kind of things that you take care of in your classroom, and this is what's going, and do a better job of that. I think right now, we put out fires, and we put out lots of fires. And we don't necessarily, and everybody's been really busy, and it's why it's so important that we build systems of how we react instead of just putting out this fire and this fire and this fire. And I think this is guiding us down a path that, oh my God, I don't know about you guys, but it's really exciting to me, because this is the stuff that I've been preaching forever, and it's so nice to see it finally getting done, and it just makes me a happy camper. So, but you're absolutely right. But we really need to find a way to how we're going to look at that, and then evaluate what we're doing. Yeah.
Do we currently do climate surveys with the students, or this will be new?
This will be
I'm
new.
so happy to see this, because so often the kids know so much more than we give them credit for, and they're willing to give so much more. So I'm really, really, really excited to see that.
Yeah, we used to look at the data that there was a state survey that went out at certain grade levels.
Yeah.
And the problem with that was there were 2 different ones. So some years somebody did one, and some people didn't. Actually, you and I had a meeting one day, because I said, you need to make this mandatory school districts have to do this because we have people writing the chip in the chaw, the community assessment plan based upon the impact of the teen survey. And it's like, well, if you didn't do the survey this year, how do you even gauge what you're doing? And our community is trying to meet their goals off of our data. So, you know, how do we make sure that that's something happen? But we're actually going to meet, Karis and I talked about it this morning on the 20th, and we're going to look at a bunch of different surveys. And then the committee that meets is going to decide which of those climate surveys we're going to use, and then when that will happen. So that team will build that system. But you're absolutely right. The kids know. And the kids, you know, and what kids feel and what they perceive, we need to know, because we may say, oh, no, that doesn't happen. But if the kids perceive it and that's how they feel, then we need to do that and address it. Because we have to validate what they're feeling, because it's, if they feel it, they feel it. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Chad, Gary is on there if you want him to say anything, because Gary helped with the P6 plan to build.
Good evening.
I see
everyone.
Gary on.
So that's goal 2 and 3. Goal 2 is ensure learning each student is prepared for academic success. And the way that we're going to measure these, and it's important to say, just so I don't have to repeat over and over, that the data is going to be disaggregated, meaning we're going to look at all the subpopulations to make sure that we're applying supports in an equitable way. So I won't say that for everyone, but it applies. So we'll look at some of our measurements here: first grade reading data, ELA and math proficiency at grades 3, 8, and 11, and then also readiness for college data. So we'll acquire some SWOCS data and see what it looks like for our students coming in terms of, are they ready for college level classes, or does SWOC identify them as needing remediation? Because we believe that when they leave here, they should be ready for college level classes. And then broken down into objectives and strategies. Objective 1 to address this is increase student learning. And strategy 1 is provide preschool, which we've been building for a while. And again, it's important to note, a lot of these we're doing, so we're just dialing them in a little bit more now that we've been working with them for a while. Because of course, we've had preschool, but we want to make sure that we're making the public statement that we want to keep that. Adopt evidence-based curricula. And our example right now is the science of reading, and making sure that we're adopting materials not on what do people want, but what is the best case approach for what is the research and science telling us about what is the best way to approach this topic. Strategy 3, build district-wide multi-tiered system of supports. And just to speak to that a little bit more, each field has its best practices, whether it's medical, social sciences, or engineering or whatnot. And we want to select what we're doing in these prescribed methods and lay them out across the entire district, so that when we come across students not succeeding, we know that this is our go-to in this circumstance. And if that doesn't work, then here's our second go-to. It's really prescribed. So we're all on the same page. So we're not sitting thinking, well, what do I do for this student? Well, let's try this or this. It's a really prescribed method based on best practices in our industry. And what it allows for us too is we get into a situation where if every student receives the same math in 4th grade, a certain percentage we expected those students should be successful with getting what we give them in the regular class without anything extra. And if about 80% of our students aren't succeeding with the regular standard methods for teaching and our curriculum that we're using, we need to dial that in more instead of just saying, well, you need to get extra help. No, because that tells us something is wrong with our basic way of doing things. And once we dial that in, then we can set up these tiers for extra. It allows us to look right at what we're doing and really zero in on that. And we do that with data reviews. And we've been doing the data reviews for a while off and on in our district, but we're really kind of getting back into it and using that Friday release time to do that, especially at the lower grade levels, and figure out, is what we're doing working? And if not, dialing that in before we send kids to interventions. And we'll get better at that. Let's see, strategy 4, provide aligned high quality professional development. which we've been doing for quite a while in the past since we revamped the professional development system a while back. And we're making sure that when we decide which way we're going, which is outlined in this plan, that's where the majority of our professional development is going. So we're all going in that same direction with these interventions, learning about them, whether they're math, English language arts, behavioral, social, emotional, that we're all going in the same direction. One of that really gets to that point is the meeting that Lisa was referencing today. The work group met to lay out our plans for the social emotional work, safe and welcoming school environment. But we talked about what is it specifically what trainings do we want everyone to have in the district so we're speaking the same language. We're all going in the same direction. So when you're a new teacher coming into our district, new staff member, whatever it is, you'll get this training so you know what to do. You don't feel lost. And we're going to move away from you getting to decide, do you want this? Because that's kind of the way it's been for a while in our district, that, well, I want the collaborative problem solving, but I'm not really interested in that. I don't want to go to that. No, in our district, this is what you do. So aligned professional development. Strategy 5, provide interventions. And that kind of circles back to the MTSS systems. And goal 3, multiple pathways for completion. Each student has multiple high-quality options for high school completion. Some of the things that we're going to do to measure this, we've got 5 here. One is on track to graduate by the end of 9th grade. You're familiar with that one. 4-year graduation and 5-year completion. Number and percentage of high school students who have completed college credits while in high school. And then CTE has 2 parts. The number of credits earned compared to the percentage of students enrolled in the high school CT credits, and then the number of CT courses offered. The CTE is definitely a major talking point for us right now, based on what the community has said that they want. Objective number 1 for this area is provide diverse course offerings. And strategy 1 is provide multiple career and technical CTE pathways. And we're looking at expanding those. And we're a little bit constrained by how big of a school district we are, because we have to have the staff to student ratio that is supported by our funding sources. So there's only so many courses that we can offer, but we really want to zero in on what our community wants and move to meet that demand. Strategy 2, provide a wide range of engaging courses. So CTE, but also make sure that we're providing those other Spanish, art, music, theater, speech, and debate. And then we also want to consider developing our feeder programs down at the lower levels. Because at times we wonder, why is our music program not have as many kids as another district? And we're thinking that we need stronger feeder programs. More exposure to these down at the lower grade levels so students can figure out, experiment, and figure out if this is for them. Because if we don't expose them to it, they don't know. Strategy 3, provide an accessible pathway for mathematical success. Historically, in every high school across the nation, math, especially Algebra 1, has been that gatekeeper. It's the class most likely for a student to receive an F. And we've talked about that before. And we're adopting the Oregon pathway, the 2+1 pathway, which brings makes math more accessible and not every pathway leads to calculus. It's a little bit more differentiated than that. So your pathway, every student will be exposed to algebra and geometry and statistics, but not every student is on the pathway necessarily towards trig, integrated 3, and calculus. They might go towards a math that is related to one of our courses, either construction, engineering, science. And again, we're only so big, we only have so many teachers and students to fill the classes, so we can't do everything, but we want to dial in some of these pathways and figure out what's a pathway that's going to work for everyone. It seems like and I'll just go back historically, my friends going through high school, when they made up their mind, I'm not going to make it in calculus. So it's kind of like, throw up your hands, well, what am I going to do? And if they can see that Well, that's not necessarily the one for everyone. There's another one that you can succeed in. That's just as intense and important, but gets to what they want. So maybe there's a little bit more motivation, and also they see that I can complete that. I'm in construction and this makes sense to me. I can complete this third-year math or this fourth-year math. And let's see, objective 2. I skipped objective 4, strategy 4. Expand opportunities for students to earn college credits in high school. So we want to make sure that we have those dual credit classes where our teachers are able to give swap credit, that we continue to have the advanced placement courses, expanded options for our, if there's a course that students want to take and we don't offer it in through our dual credit teachers, that they can go to SWAC for the class or online or at SWAC. And then we want to conduct equity audits to make sure that everyone is being targeted in terms of getting promoted and told you can do this. And a lot of that happens through our AVID classes. The students that traditionally, maybe their family hasn't graduated from high school, or they haven't seen themselves on the pathway to these cool classes, to make sure that you have staff telling them, no, you can do it, let's sign you up for it. They kind of put them in a place that they have to actually opt out of the pathway instead of opting in, because if you don't have adults in your life telling you you can do it and we're pushing you towards it, they're less likely to experiment and give it a go. And so we want to make sure that when we conduct these audits as part of our AVID data gathering cycle at the end of the year, we make sure that each group is represented fairly, and if not, figure out why is that the case? What are we missing here? How are we not promoting it to all these groups so they see themselves succeeding? Let's see, objective 2, offer alternative pathways for high school completion. Strategy 1, provide high quality instruction and support to increase graduation and attendance rates. And we've been doing this, but it just goes kind of back to dialing in these different programs for the students. One of the important factors there is we've been experimenting this year with a little bit more SEL support, social emotional learning support at Destination, and we want to keep that up. And we also want to make sure that Destinations continues to be exposed to curriculum the same as if they were at Marshfield or someplace else dialed in for them. Strategy 2, develop a district-wide vision for alternative education. Again, we've done this a few times in the past, and this is probably, I know of at least 2 times since I've been here, since 2005, but pull together a group again of representatives, students, community members, board members, whoever wants to be on that group, to kind of revision again what we want to do with Destinations at this point in time, and our other support school programs like Resource Link, and then maybe even building a parent program in there. Just looking to make sure I'm not missing anything here. All right, strategy 2 here, provide a wide range of engaging courses. Did I get to that?
You already done that one. Okay. Objective 3, increase graduation.
Gotcha. Thank you. Objective 3, increase graduation completion and on track to graduate. Provide credit recovery. We feel like our credit recovery plan has been successful, but we're going to dial that in a little bit more even this year with reformulating our online classes somewhat and changing the staff members involved in that. One of the things that we want to do with credit recovery is try to give more math support, at least during a few periods of credit recovery. We think that having a math teacher in there for a few periods will, again, it kind of goes back to that 9th grade algebra being the gatekeeper. Want to boost that somewhat to help with math, passing those early math classes. Strategy 2, develop academic success plans and develop meaningful relationships with families with credit deficient students. We want to really, we've been tracking on track to graduate, but we really want to dial that in a little bit more and be more specific in that MTSS approach with those students. And making sure we don't have anybody falling through the cracks. And that would include students that aren't showing up and they're past the 10-day drop period. And reach out to them even more and figure out what's happening, why aren't they coming back, and plug them into one of our programs. Provide after-school academic support. That's a little bit newer for us. And we want to set aside funding for after-school tutors, and we have a few ideas of a way to do that, either our staff, classified or licensed, community partners, or even peer tutors, and to see which one of those is the most successful. And it may be a combination depending on the student that needs the service. And then we want to make summer school to some extent a yearly thing. In the past, we've kind of scrambled to, because summer school is not mandatory. And so we've scrambled towards the end of the year to figure out how we're going to fund it. And we've gotten lucky these last few years. We've had summer funding from the state. But we need to make it at least at a minimum, a permanent solution. And then if we receive extra funding, build on it from there. And we'll use our credit recovery system to do that. I'll pause there for questions or thoughts.
So with the emphasis on the math support, I'm just out of curiosity, are people not graduating? Is there a significant number of students? Does math seem to be a roadblock?
Historically, nationwide, that is, if you ask an educator, especially a secondary educator, what is the most likely class that students going to receive in math? And it's the first year math. Whether for us it's integrated 1, but for most schools nationwide, I think they call it Algebra 1. We've called it Algebra 1 at some point in history. Statistically, yes. And it was interesting, Eli said to us today, this is the first time that he can remember, and it's the first time for me at Marshfield, that actually right now at this point in time, it's actually 9th grade English. But we don't know if that's just like a weird hiccup or what. And we need to research that a little bit more to figure out what's going on. And that was kind of a shock today.
I'd like to see a math curriculum on we've rolled out the language arts. It's nice to see that we got, the next sort of upper bat.
Other thoughts or ideas?
Where you've got offer 13 dual credit courses, which ones do you offer now? How many are there?
There's quite a few. I'm going to be hard pressed to name them all. There are a lot of the college writing, literature classes. I'm going to be really hard pressed to name them.
It's like psychology, maybe.
Yeah, psychology is one of those, but psychology is actually the AP. There's a history, one of the history classes is, because we actually use their SWAT book right now. Gosh. I'm sorry, I can't name
Nothing
them.
that's pretty close to an associate's degree.
Yeah.
Right.
Between everything that we offer here, of course,
Here
we
and
we
then-
do get students. If they're a little, just using my daughter as an example, it's difficult and you have to give up a lot of your free time. It almost becomes your after school sport. Because there's not, it's hard to get, the way we have it set up right now, it's hard to get your transfer degree by the time you leave Marshfield. Unless you're going to take summer classes, night classes and everything like that. You can get pretty close. You have a semester, maybe 2 semesters left, which is a great head start.
Oh,
And one of the things we talked about, if you were on our committee here when you were posting up in the sign-up course, maybe making that program more accessible and finding a pathway. And what it means is students need to start probably a year earlier, because most of our students start taking those classes if they're on that pathway in their junior year. And we might need to find a way for those students that they know that they want to graduate with that transfer degree, get them started in their sophomore year. But it really takes the type of student that has decided this is my sport in a sense. It's not, because you're going to have to give up some other things, activities at high school to be able to get it done in the way that it's mapped out right now.
I have a quick question, Mike. You only mentioned it briefly, it's not really in here, but the 10-day drop, is that a district rule or is that a state rule?
Yeah.
Okay, And that's a 10-day drop if there's no communication, right? Or,
No, because even if they communicate, it's because it's tied to the way that the state gives us funding for students. And we're only supposed to receive funding if they're here, and that's where the state sets the deadline. And one of the things that the state told us during COVID is help make it so keep reaching out to them and make it so when they get back, like they don't have to fill out the reams of paperwork again. You just bring them back in because you don't want that to be a roadblock.
so they
Especially-
should just re-enroll.
Yes. So it really doesn't, it should be seamless for them. It's more an accounting issue on our part.
Since SWAC rid of all the remedial classes with math and reading, our students need to come in. They don't have any more since fundamentals for their so math 20 or any of that. Yep. So we need to be ready. So, and it will be enlightening. I was in a group with Allie. They haven't done it yet, but she said that there was a way that they could pull that data at SWAC. And I just have I had a ongoing argument with my husband about which students are prepared to learn,
Right.
who's being more bent. He said, my dad's gonna show. He's like, I know. So I really want to see that. I hope we can go on. And then I had one question about the equity piece. Conduct ongoing equity audits and recruitment and support of focus groups. And you talked a little bit about audit classes. Is that the equity audit? What is?
We want to conduct equity audits for all of these items that it applies to that are listed out here. I just didn't reiterate that every time.
Right.
And just making sure that all groups are served appropriately so that
What does that look like?
well, a class like, for instance, one of these college classes, when we look at the student population in those college classes, it should mirror to a pretty close extent what our student population is.
Right.
It shouldn't be all one group.
100% white people and all male. So you're gonna pull all the data to basically do an audit of that data.
To make sure that each group
Okay.
is represented, and if not, figure out what's going on here.
So AVID classes, what is that?
All right, okay, so AVID has two prongs. There's a school-wide prong and then there's an AVID elective prong. And it's everybody's going to something post-secondary, like helping them figure out where they're going, but also graduate. And then what are you doing next? Whether it's a trade school, tech school, going into the workforce, whatever it is, but wanting students to leave with a plan. And the elective side of it is the students that traditionally they're struggling and maybe they haven't seen their family members on one of those tracks post-secondary and what's going on there. And so it's kind of like they don't know how to do school. How do you study? How do you get a peer group together and study? Because a lot of people, it'll come naturally, or their parents are kind of supporting that. And it's like, okay, if you're trying to learn something, if you've been to a course, technical school or whatever, you kind of get in your group and study, who can help you and how to get help, how to talk to a professor or a teacher to get help. But we take some of these simple things for granted that a student, when they need help, they know how to get help,
Right.
or they know how to put together a peer group to study, or how to research to get answers to questions to learn what they need. And it puts that aside, that we take that for granted, and it actually teaches them how to go through that process.
Great, because that's
And-
why we have doctors, kids who become doctors. And then we have teachers, kids become teachers because they have an avenue and they see themselves and their parents or relatives and they have an avenue to get there. Well, if your parents never graduated from high school and they were traumatized by school, you don't necessarily know that. How do I do that stuff? And how do I fill out a financial aid form? And what is this? What's your job? Exactly.
I love the Avid.
Avid has a regular curriculum, as a program, a number of schools use it. They also have, the state, across the community, the school program. taking notes, how to keep a notebook. I mean, all sorts of things they have curriculum for that all kids should have to go.
Learn all that myself.
I
I love this. This is great,
And
Chad.
he was describing the school-wide, not the elective. I've got in more of the elective, and he's describing more the school-wide approach. And so when you go into the schools and you see things like when you first go into the front of Marshfield and you see all the college banners up front, that's an added strategy. It's not just getting kids exposed to it. And when you go into a teacher's classroom, they have one part on their wall where they have the school that they went to and their memorabilia from their university that they went to, whatever it was, just so kids can see like, oh, I'm interested in that college, I know who to ask, or I see that these people went to, or this teacher went to this trade school, or whatever it is, just so that they kind of see like, oh, it's everywhere, I know who to ask, so more exposure.
It's kind of like Upward Bound and some of the
Yeah.
programs you've seen. They do that for a particular group, subsection of our schools. Have it as a program for school-wide and then the more intense. Elective. You have to give up something to do the elective.
And so one of the things that our avid teachers are going to do, right, our avid elective teachers, just to their students, is all of you in this class are signing up for one of these advanced classes next year, the 2+2, an AP, or an expanded options, like no excuses, everybody in this class is doing it. So it forces them to opt out and say, no, I'm not, instead of waiting for them to, because if not, they don't think we're talking to them. It's like, hey, do you want to take a 2+2 class? And it's like, if you look out there, you can see the looks on their face. It's like, oh, he's not talking about me. No, I'm talking about you, everybody.
Did Gary want to add anything?
Gary, jump in.
I guess I just wondered if anybody had any questions for me about any of the K-6 initiatives that were discussed earlier. I guess would be the best way.
Still have one more goal, and you guys, we need to be out of here in 3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes. Who's doing the third?
I'm doing the last one.
Well, you better speak fast. Thank you very much. Chad. It was nice hearing
Oh.
you.
Okay, I didn't know if you guys could hear me. Could you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
And then we were just silent.
Okay.
No one had any questions, but we appreciate you being here.
All right, no problem. Thanks, guys. Have a great evening.
So the last goal is the district stewardship goal. So this is really a lot of more the central office, the district-wide functions. So first of all, which we heard, number one came out of the survey, and how we're going to measure success is looking at the recruitment and retention of staff. So we're going to track yearly data showing the retention rates of our staff. The next, staff diversity. We want to track, is our staff mirroring the demographics of our students? Staff satisfaction. We don't currently have a system in place except for the annual TEL survey for some staff. So we just need to come up with a plan for how are we going to gauge how our staff is doing. Next is our long range facilities construction and maintenance. So how are we doing once we get that created next year, then the board can start, are we making progress on our long range facilities plan? And then 5 is the annual financial audit. That's a tried and true way to know if we are being fiscally responsible with the district's resources. So again, those objectives just mirror those measures. Objective 1, here are strategies around recruiting and retaining high quality staff. Objective 2, that's our thing, provide high quality stewardship of district-wide resources. That includes a technology plan to make sure that we can refresh and replenish now that we've gone to a one-to-one with our students. Technology devices. Strategy 2, we want to continue to provide safe and well-maintained facilities. Our facilities are phenomenal, and we want to continue that, maintaining them. Strategy 4 is maintaining a fiscally responsible budget. And 4 is improve communication and engage our communities. And interestingly, if you're in the board packet, the very last page, we shared this draft that you're seeing with the Equity Advisory Committee last week. And this was their input on each goal. And one of the big themes that I noted when I read their feedback is from the Equity Committee, they want us to do more family engagement and parenting education and training. And that's where that last strategy under communication, community engagement really look at strengthening our family engagement strategies fits in, and that was one of the big themes we heard from the Equity Advisory Committee. So that is our plan. That's a draft plan. Kim, you were on the strategic planning team. Do you have anything to add? Or Terry's here. Do you have anything you would like to add that we missed, that we didn't share, that we didn't reflect? No, I think it.
Yeah, I think it was a great experience. I tend to like know what I want to say and then like patience is not the biggest thing for me because I'm like, here's what we want to say and then it took a while to get there because it's that accordion piece where you take everything and it's like, okay, we had every student and then we were like, we need it to be birthed through, 55 years old, and then I'm exaggerating, but still, this is what it felt like. And they're like, don't forget this. And we were like, this is really important. And we wanted to focus on all this. And everybody had their areas of like passion in it. And so it takes, just time to kind of get it whittled down to something, because we needed something where Karis can say, really easy, each student thrives, in a high quality learning environment, and we had like this paragraph, like 3-paragraph mission statement at first, and we kept going over and over and over and to get feedback to just whittle it down, and then see this today, student thrives. Oh my goodness, this is so exciting! It's great to have it, and I think everybody was mostly in consensus, and we fit everything in it. I mean,
So hold it. If we change it, then we can do cups then.
I know.
This will be just a gift from the superintendent.
Yeah.
We'll order second bugs with the school board's motto.
Label the sticker.
We're gonna change each to every now.
I know.
Looks like Gary has his hand raised.
Gary, do you have your hand raised?
I do. I just wanted to point out that as we went through this process, I think one of the really interesting and one of the great things is a lot of these initiatives that are being discussed tonight, we've been, working on or had that goal in mind, for the 4 years that I've been involved with Coos Bay Schools. We've been talking about, science of reading and the MTSS plans, the RTI project, things like that. And so it's exciting to see these things that we've been discussing and even kept in our minds and our hearts through COVID are now starting to be able to be put into play, hopefully. So thank you.
Thank you.
And just note, this is a 4-year plan. We can't all do all of this in 1 year next year.
What?
We're gonna map this. So this is a lot of important work. And so think of this as a 4-year plan. We can't overwhelm the system and do everything in 1 year. And the money to pay for it all is another constraint that we have to address as we're thinking about the 4-year plan. But this gives us a roadmap, and this gives us priorities as we go into the budget conversations around what are we prioritizing in our funding.
Any other questions for Karis or our audience?
The last piece we didn't share, but I know we're out of time. There's a link in your on your agenda to the budget spreadsheets. Those are the required ODE templates where I talked about each of these action steps we just went through under each strategy, like the ABCD. Those have been mapped into, it's in a spreadsheet, and it has an X which funding source is going to pay for each activity. And that's, if you go to that URL, if you click on that link, you can look at those spreadsheets. It's the same information. It's just in ODE spreadsheet form. So if you have questions about the spreadsheet, but just know Chad just took what we put in here and put them in those spreadsheet templates and what funding source is going to fund each of the activities.
So what you're saying is you've got all the money you need to find it.
Nope. We have a funding source identified that could potentially help fund all of it.
Arnie's checkbook.
Don't get used to that car.
All right, do we have any public input?
Not public, but before you leave, just want to remind you that this is your plan ultimately. And we have about 3 weeks to finalize it, 2 weeks to finalize it. So if you have changes, and you can make changes, that's why we're presenting today. If you have changes, make sure you let Karis know or let me know or let somebody know pretty quick. Because we want it to reflect your will and what you want to do in the next 4 years.
You want to change the cup?
We're gonna be,
We want to another.
I just want to just know that I can change the cup
Yes.
if we agree to change the cup.
I was very adamant about that when we were beginning this. I was like, okay, we're gonna have everything I dotted, T's crossed, and everything, and then we're just sending it to the board, and then we're gonna feel like we're rubber stamping it. And then it was like, no, we have input here. But after all that work, it's better not.
One more thing. Bounce on the Equity Advisory Committee. Their input has not been reflected in this plan in front of you. So if you read it, you see something that you think should be added, let us know. There's still time to change it.
Equity Advisory Committee, is that what you said?
Yeah, the last 2 pages are their, after they reviewed it, their thoughts, what they liked and didn't
Okay.
like. But we didn't make any changes. We wanted to leave that to you guys.
Okay.
So am I correct in assuming that this is somewhat of a living document? Like, it's not gonna just be this for the next 4 years. If things change or we find things that need to be added or removed, they can be revised.
I would foresee that we routinely, as board and with me and with staff, we're reviewing the outcome measures, we're reviewing and revising and refining the plan. And then if we need to change anything in the funding spreadsheets to ODE, we can submit revisions to ODE for approval. So I very much see this as a living document. This year will be baseline. We're going to look at baseline data. We're going to see where we're going. And if we need to make mid-course corrections every year, we have that opportunity.
And it's likely we'll have to do that with the funding streams. Because even today, I was still receiving estimates like how much things are gonna cost next year. And I tried to estimate as best as I could, but there's gonna be some changes in all levels.
We're at bargaining, for example. We don't know what that's. Those kind of things. How much the governor and legislature is going to give us for the state school fund. There's just a lot of unknowns. So we did our best for projection.
And David, you said we're in public input for tonight? Okay, so we are going to be going into executive session. We're discussing right now to review and evaluate the performance of an officer or staff member. The person does not request an open meeting or as 92 or 660 something.
Thank you for coming, Jerry.
I and 192 section 8. We will reconvene from executive session when we are through with this. But just before we do, I will say facilities meeting on March 7th, 9 a.m. Kevin. And then our policy meeting is March 23rd at 4 p.m. All right. And we are back from executive session and we are going to adjourn this meeting. Good night.